What's up, everybody? It's Miles Turner, the Indiana Pacers. You're listening to the Paceroos Podcast. Be sure to follow @Paceroos on Twitter.
Welcome back to the Paceroos, and we're here with a longtime friend of the show. Second time he's been on, and we really appreciate him coming back and talking about the NBA's return, particularly from the Pacers' perspective. The chief writer and podcaster with the Fieldhouse Files, Scott Agness. Thank you so much for being here again today.
Happy to be on, mates. How are you guys doing?
We're good. It's early morning here in Australia, so we're doing what we can. Speaking of yourself, it's a really weird circumstance with obviously the NBA being played from afar. You won't have necessarily the face-to-face contact that you usually do, but you're doing now the Fieldhouse Files website and the Fieldhouse Files podcast post your career with The Athletic. Do you want to just talk a little bit about your new venture and what that involves?
Yeah, sure. Appreciate that, Adam. My big thing in all this is I've been watching how media continues to evolve. Things continue to change. And I think we're all fighting for attention, right? You want Pacer fans. I want Pacer fans. There's so much of a competition for all of that, whether you're the team trying to sell tickets, etc. So long story short, I wanted to go direct to fans. So you don't have to follow me on Twitter. You don't have to go to the site. If you're a loyal or diehard fan, or even you're casual, if you sign up at fieldhousefiles.com, it goes right to your inbox. You don't have to read every one, so maybe you don't care. But if it piques your interest, it goes right to you. You don't have to even try. So whether you're on a subway or here in Indianapolis and got 5 minutes to chill before a meeting, that's kind of how I envision it. On top of that, much better mobile design than what I was previously working with before I moved to the Athletic. And we all know that's absolutely critical today. I think 90% of traffic, at least for the written word, seemingly is for mobile. So that was important to me. And then I kept the familiar theme of the Fieldhouse Files. So now it's the podcast and the written work all right there for people to enjoy and consume.
Yeah, that's awesome, Scott. I know, speaking on behalf of a lot of Pacer fans I speak to, you're definitely up there with one of the favourite, if not the best, Pacers writer there is. So, it's definitely great to have you on the show. But, firstly, how much are you looking forward to the NBA coming back? Obviously, you got suspended with that Utah-Oklahoma game on March 16th. As a writer and, I guess, fan of the league, how excited are you for the league to come back in the next week or so?
Yeah, really excited. I think like all of us, number one, just as a sports fan, because we haven't had a ton. We've had some golf, a little bit of tennis this past weekend, a little auto racing, but really not much, not one of the main four sports. And I guess baseball is coming back now. So that's absolutely huge. I think for all of us, just kind of a peace of mind, something to flip on that's live, because the MJ documentary can only take us and carry us so far. Yeah. I think. And so then as it relates to my job, of course, you're going to have more people interested, more people consuming, more people with questions. And so I think your diehards are going to follow in May and read your casual article about anyone on the team or an executive or what have you. But now you're going to get much of your casual fan base and just Pacer observers that are interested in what's going on and, what's the injury status and how's the coaching staff, and are they going to look any different? Just basic questions, because it's been 131 days, believe it or not. That's as long as an off season would be.
That's crazy.
And we're about to have another off season here coming up. So yeah, exactly. That is absolutely too long.
And speaking of sports, I want to ask you, obviously one of the biggest sports over here in Australia is AFL. Have you been tuning into any of the games?
First of all, my guy, A.K. Riley, I got to give you a shout out. You are absolutely crushing it. And I hope
I can't be getting a shout out on my own podcast, Scott. Come on now.
I have to, because your fan base, your audience has to know how incredible you are. And I think a team should absolutely hire you. A team like the Pacers, who is weak somewhat in the department. They've gotten better in social media. Someone like them or another team or whatever could use your services. Anyways.
We love it, Scott. We love the love.
I can go on and on. So here's the real thing in a quick rant. A lot of his videos, like 30 seconds a minute. Sometimes I'd say that's too long, right? Our attention span's not there. I find myself not only watching the entire thing, but watching it a couple times, analyzing both the Pacer aspect and the technical design in it, like the flash or the fire that comes out or whatever it is, just in awe of how he does it. And in college, that is ridiculous. You are absolutely on your way. I'm proud of you.
The listeners can't see, but Alex's head is suddenly filling the Zoom screen right now, and you almost can't see it. It's that big. So, but we love him, and he's so good at what he does. You're right.
If anything, it's just further encouragement. You're on your right track. That's all I want to say.
So it's a no on the AFL then.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was blowing you up with props a little bit too much. I checked it out one night, and that was about all I needed. I gambled on it for 2 bets. I think I went with the favorites and won for like a $5 bet on each one. That's how desperate I was, and that's about as long as it held my attention. So
fair enough.
Yeah, I can't really blame you there. But
not for everyone.
going back into the Pacers, I think obviously the talk of the town is with the main man, Victor Oladipo.
Oh, it is? I was not aware. I'm sorry.
If you haven't been on Twitter in the last month, but I think for us, what we've talked about the most is just the lack of communication between him and the front office. So the fact that obviously, I think it was Jay Michael that reported that Nate McMillan found out like we did on social media. So I just wanted to get your point of view on the whole situation, and I think that like I said, that's what we've been talking about the most. So what's your biggest takeaway from what's going on with Vic in the last couple of weeks?
Yeah, and that's basically what is central to this issue, guys, is a breakdown in communication. Vic and his team wanting to be ahead of it, wanting to own the news cycle, only for those of us in the media to kind of laugh at it. Because if you realize here in America, and when that happened, it was like 4:00 on a Friday, which is essentially news dump time. And if people aren't familiar with that, that means if something happens, if there is a scandal, if you fire somebody, that's when you announce it. You don't announce something at that time to be the center of the conversation, to be the center of the TV shows, which I think was the intended purpose. But they could have used some advice there because they totally missed the mark there. And this has been an ongoing issue. Yeah, Nate, the coaching staff, his teammates, the front office, all learned through his report in the media that he didn't intend to play, which that in itself made no sense as well, because why are you ruling yourself out when nobody asked you, basically, is how I continue to go back to it. You have no need to rule yourself out, even if you're trending that way. And the same would hold right now as we record this, days before scrimmaging. Even if he didn't plan to play, he could give it a couple more days to see how he felt and maybe come to that resolution, or work with the Players Association if it's in terms of money and finalize that. But back to the communication breakdown, this has been an ongoing thing, I would say, for the last 18 months or so. If you remember back on, I want to say it was January 8th, when he announced through the media, again, a report or one-on-one, I should say, where he said, I'm going to return January 29th. Everybody learned about it that night as well, including Coach McMillan. And his minutes restriction kind of pushed by Victor and his guys a little bit. So there is no doubt about it, guys. Victor and his people are in full control of what is going on with him, both in terms of him playing or not, both in terms of where he rehabs, both of where in terms of his doctor, where he had the surgery, where he rehabbed, or just a little thing like he spent this last 115 days, let's say, not in Indianapolis rehabbing, not around team doctors, team training staff, or the team facility like Jeremy Lamb has, where he has been available. All those resources have been available to him. It's not wrong, but it's just the fact he chose to go home to Orlando, spend it there. He does have his own personal physical therapist, but he doesn't have all the other stuff that he would be available to him and at his disposal here in Indianapolis.
Yeah, it's interesting that, there's a bit of a change of tune there once he got to Orlando and started scrimmaging and started being around his teammates. I think one of the things that we covered on an episode a couple of weeks ago was that Victor appears to be really heavily influenced by those that are closest to him. Do you see that being close to his teammates, being close to the staff on the team has influenced, I guess, a decision to give this a try compared to his view before he got to Orlando?
I would not say from a team standpoint, but for those whose opinion he values, they are absolutely influential. No doubt about it. But no teammate is pushing him along. Now, make no mistake, he hears everything. He reads everything. So when people probably filled his timeline on Twitter or went into his DMs to complain, whatever they do nowadays, he absolutely heard it. He was frustrated, bothered, annoyed, I'm told, about what he was hearing and how some felt like he was giving up, or why'd you play in 13 games but now are unwilling. A lot of it, from his standpoint, I absolutely understand. The trouble is both in his announcement and the messaging that he goes with it, because if the idea, guys, is that you want to protect yourself for a contract season, then even if you don't get your $3 million for this year, you're absolutely doing that and protecting yourself. So you can't come back and want more money while protecting your other investment. Those things don't run in parallel to me. And so again, all of this goes back to mixed messaging.
We had a really interesting episode a couple of weeks ago when that news came out, Scott, and I think it was there was a tinge of sadness to it because it came along with some pretty hot free agency rumors about Oladipo. He's always been linked to Miami. There's been talk of teams in contending positions wanting to add him as a third star. Do you see any reason for Pacers fans to be worried about that?
A little bit, certainly, and mostly for the reasoning that it's just the reality, right? He's coming up within a contract extension. I'm sure the Pacers will offer it, and the most they can offer him is $25 million. So they don't have much wiggle room at the high end. They can't go past that based on the collective bargaining agreement. So even if he wants to stay, if he wants more money, it is in his best business interest to wait another year. Now, with that said, it might not be in his best health interest, right? Or maybe he'd want to consider taking out insurance on a potential mammoth injury that could potentially cost him $100 million, let's say. Now, with that said, yeah, you're exactly right. There have been rumors. I think a lot of them lately have just been tossed out, quite honestly, because there hadn't been much to talk about and a lot of connecting of the dots. For example, like Leon Rose, one of his former agents, now runs the New York Knicks. I haven't heard anything substantial about that, but that's absolutely something I would consider, and in connecting the dots, it would make sense. Victor does a lot out there. When he's out in New York, he has his stylist is out there. He goes there flying on a private jet to go do photo shoots for Express. So it would make a lot of that other part of Victor's life so much easier, and on top of that, maybe he would like the big be able to shine in a big market like that in New York and Brooklyn and things like that. But that is purely speculation on everyone's part, trying to connect the dots and what would make sense. As far as Miami, I've heard that as far as more than a year ago, that's something people were looking into or were pushing him towards. Now, that's not suggestive of maybe how he feels or if he's considering it. But I'm sure it's something in back channels either he's looking into or saying, yeah, who else is going there? I'm curious. This is my off-season home. While he spent quarantine in Orlando, he spent the last 2 summers in Miami. And he is no longer working out with the personal trainer down there, so that's not an obvious tie. He has his own physical therapist so that he can take wherever he goes. So yeah, those are more connecting the dots. But I think more than anything, guys, they should be concerned only because it's a small market and their star has the threat of leaving.
Yeah, I think judging by Pace's Twitter last week, it would be a worst case scenario if Oladipo went to Miami, which is kind of the Pacers' biggest rival in a sense. So, I guess we'll stay tuned with that over the next year or so. Now, before I get to my question, Scott, I just want to give you a massive shout out. I told the boys I want to give you a shout out on the show because I, like probably all Pacer fans who were watching that media conference Oladipo did, and the first 5-10 minutes were like, I don't care about any of these questions. You know, how the bubbles.
Softballs, Scott.
Scott, you came in hard with the hard-hitting question that every Pacer fan wanted to know. So I thank you for that. And it actually put Vic on the back step. And I personally think he got pretty defensive. So just want to give you a shout out on the show for that. But to my question, I just wanted your personal opinion on the Pacers' strategy with star players. Now, me personally, I think they kind of, with Larry Bird at the helm, they kind of were playing hardball with Paul George a bit. You know, that famous quote is, you know, he doesn't run the team, I run the team. And
hold on, I want to explain that quote because that's another one that I got, and a lot of people have run with it, and I don't think they exactly understand the context. Maybe you guys do, but I've heard that on local sports talk. That quote is run wild. All right, so let me set the scene. And real fast, I'll go back even to the question that we needed answered is why would you rule yourself out? We're talking about Oladipo.
Yeah.
That made no sense. So the only two questions we needed answered, are you going to play or not? And why did you rule yourself out? Because that was unnecessary and before you even talked to anyone. And yeah, he did get a defensive, and the challenge in that was it was via Zoom. And my mic was muted. So I didn't even have a chance to follow up or clarify, if anything, my question. And he was trying to describe to us, you know, you don't understand how difficult it is to to respond from an injury like this. It's rare. I'm like, actually, you know what? I've written a ton about that. I know that's not it.
Yeah.
Again, it's just the date. I'm not questioning anything about his rehab or where he is. Now, in terms of this quote, this was related to Paul George. I wanted to say it was probably 2015. We were out at a local high school about 20 miles away. And to set this up, I was asking him about the upcoming year. And I've heard, Paul, that Larry really would like to see you get some playing time at the power forward spot. What do you think about that? And he goes, yeah, I don't know. I haven't heard a lot. I don't know about a lot about that. I think it's more spot minutes here and there rather than maybe full-time or significant minutes. So then Larry Bird talked, I think 2 weeks later, let's say. We were in the media room and sitting at a round table. And I go, hey, Larry, talked to Paul last couple weeks ago. Has the understanding that he'll play spot minutes there, not significant minutes. What is your understanding, or what would you like for him to do? And that's where Larry, I think, kind of jumped at it. And being the honest guy he always is, he brought out that quotable line, well, he don't run the team around here. So anyways, proceed. I just wanted to make that context out there, if anything, for your listeners that maybe aren't aware.
Well, yeah, that's great. And it's actually amazing you got that quote, because it's, a very widely known quote from Larry Bird. But, yeah, I guess the question I wanted to ask was, I think, from the outside, as a fan perspective, I think the Pacers management handled Paul George very differently and maybe learned some lessons. I think a lot of Pacer fans don't like the way Paul George carried his team, but they are realising on Pacers maybe made a few mistakes with the Paul George situation. Now they've obviously got this new star player in Oladipo, and from my perspective, it seems like Kevin Pritchard and the team, they let him do the Masked Singer while he was out injured. They let him, go to Miami. He's talking to Shams before the team, and they've given him a lot more freedom. I think Kevin Pritchard also maybe mentions to Oladipo about potential free agent news, and just want to get your opinion. Do you think that's going to help the Pacers organization? I feel like they've given the keys to Oladipo a bit more than Paul George, but now we're starting to get rumors that he might leave anyway.
Yeah, so that's complicated there. Number one, I think I'll start with, we have to understand who's in charge, and it was Larry Bird during Paul George's tenure. And the other thing I like to bring up, and you could say he was lying, but I have this on record. We were in Chicago, I think it was 2016, was it, before his final year? Yeah, it was 2016 before the Olympics. And I was asking him about the offseason acquisitions. They signed Monte Ellis. They got Al Jefferson, a couple other guys that aren't necessarily impressive. And he came out and said right there courtside, I remember specifically him saying, yeah, I appreciate them not wanting to waste my prime years. I really like these guys. I think they're going to be strong acquisitions here. So Paul, before the season, was speaking highly of both what the Pacers and Larry Bird has done. What I think, and what you're alluding to, and it's absolutely correct, is there was, to the Pacers' detriment, some kind of communication breakdown. And a lot of it, I think, stemmed kind of right after that. I'm thinking back to in February, right before the trade deadline, where Paul he felt out of touch. He didn't feel like he was involved in the conversations as much as he should have, or at least alerted, are you trading me or are you not? And my understanding in all this is they had no intentions of trading him. They were just unsure about what direction they might go this next summer, which I think would have been 2017. And they wanted to kind of gauge his stock, see what his value. Were they going to get multiple picks? Could they get guys that contribute right away? And generally, that's actually what the Pacers prefer rather than draft picks, because you never know what those could turn into, how high the pick exactly could come. So I think no doubt this franchise has learned to improve its communication with its players, and I think it goes down to even whether a guy plays or not, or health related, etc. And so many times after that, we have now seen Kevin Pritchard take charge and really listen to his guys. And if you remember that first year under him, they totally exceeded expectations and were on pace and won 48 games. But there was significant reasons why they should have made moves at the trade deadline, offset some guys that were entering that had expiring deals. They could have picked up draft picks, those sorts of things. And guys like Darren Collison and Al Jefferson and such came to Kevin Pritchard and said, hey, we deserve to play this out. We've exceeded expectations, and Kevin hadn't made a move. And he hadn't made a move that really has moved a player other than acquiring picks in his tenure, which is very unlike him, especially during his time with Portland. So I think that's been one area where he's changed completely. And then in terms of Vic, Sorry for these long-winded answers. And in terms of Vic here, is what you're seeing with him is very much the LeBron model. I'm taking charge. I'm doing what I want. And those things you mentioned, he technically does not need any approval anyway from the team. So the Masked Singer, that was off season. Now, maybe they would have preferred him not doing that because he was rehabbing. But in all retrospect, it builds a profile a little bit of the Pacers. Just like Paul George appearing on the NBA 2K cover. That's something they can sell to guys and say, hey, look, you don't have to play in New York. You can come to Indiana and be on the cover or be on a mainstream TV show. So if I'm the franchise, I'm selling that and embracing that as long as it does not get in the way of rehab or make you more susceptible to an injury. And him spending time in Miami, that's not something they necessarily like. Of course, they'd prefer him in Indy. But they're adapting to that, and they're sending somebody down there almost every other week. Kevin Pritchard, Chad Buchanan, a strength coach, etc., to go work. Bill Bano was there a couple weeks just to work with him, see him, touch him, make sure they know, hey, if you ever need us, we're here, and we're going to be here anyway.
Yeah. It sounds like, Scott, from what you're saying, there's a chance, and it sounds like potentially a significant chance that Oladipo does choose a different team next summer. I'll ask, do you think if Kevin Pritchard, based on what he's done in the past, do you think if at any point he believes that will be the end game here, that he will look to maximize his return for Victor Oladipo before his contract runs out?
I think you have to. I think you absolutely have to consider that, whether it's a trade after this restart, which feels like a completely new season. Maybe you get to the trade deadline next year. That gets a little bit complicated, right? Because it's the final year under his contract. And if you think of Vic for this upcoming offseason, he could be treated much like Malcolm Brogdon. A team could not only acquire him, but extend him. But again, they would be limited in the amount of money, but they could then give 5 years because of bird rights rather than 4 years. So if I'm Victor at 29 years old next year, that's something that absolutely intrigues me, is I want to guarantee as much money in the most amount of years as I can after this significant type of injury. And if I'm Victor, number one, I want to maximize my value, of course. And I'm very curious how the rest of the league feels about me, right? And he's always been a guy that's very under the radar. He was like ranked 110th, I want to say, coming out of high school. And the only reason Indiana University found him is because then head coach Tom Crean was there to recruit other guys. So he outworked his ranking and became, I think, Defensive Player of the Year his junior year at IU. Had some ins and outs with the league, right, a little bit, or in the early going. Magic used him entirely wrong, trying to turn him into a point guard that's not him. The Thunder, he played behind Russell, didn't get a lot of touches, learned a lot off the court, but didn't exactly progress on the court, and I wouldn't say until the offseason. Then he comes to Indiana. They embrace him. He's the star player. And that's the other thing, guys, I think that's going on right now, is for the first time in his career, all attention is on him. He's the man, quote unquote. And if he wants to say it's his city or what have you, it is, but that's all new to him. And so I'm watching closely how he reacts to it, how he adapts to it, and is that a good thing?
I think I just wanted to ask you, because we are talking about, potentially dealing him. What do you gauge his trade value being? Seeing as he is, as you mentioned, only got 1 year left on his deal. I know a team that deals for him can get his bird rights, but if KP was to look to trade him, what kind of value could we be looking at in return? Is it going to be similar to the Paul George deal where they go for two younger guys, or are they going to stay winning now? I'm struggling to see, firstly, what teams are going to want to trade for him. And then secondly, if we're going to get a, not equal return, but a somewhat decent return similar to PG.
Yeah, and this is a few ways down the road, but it's certainly something a lot of Pacer fans are wondering and discussing for obvious reasons here. I think, number one, they're always in win-now mode. I mean, this is a franchise that's made the playoffs now this year. I think it's 25 times in 31 years. Incredible stability. But you could also make the argument, if you're always good but never great, is it worth never not being bad? That is a legitimate argument you could have, because you're never – I don't think they've had a top 10 draft pick that they selected since 1989, I believe.
We've had
that is absolutely wild.
Crazy.
It's frustrating for Pacers fans a little bit, because, you don't want to finish 8th every year.
No, and you can kind of bank on 45 wins, but the other thing in all this that's a very real issue that we see both in the attendance and I think probably an interest in our podcasts and our sites and such, is this is not a fan base that probably would be willing to take several 20-win seasons. I just don't think they'd turn away. They'd turn to the NFL. They'd turn to college basketball, which is obviously big here. And so that's something that has to be considered in all this, and a big reason why they continue to be about winning now. And so I don't think they'd want draft picks. I think they absolutely would want kind of what they did in the past. It's those guys that are, as Kevin Pritchard always talks about, that they value higher than other teams or can use a little bit differently, and that's exactly what Vic and Domas were. They were playing Domas and OKC as a spread 5, or as a spread 4, I think mostly, shooting threes and that sort of thing. And here, he's able to play the 4 and the 5, but mostly the 5 with that second unit, and that's where he's most comfortable, back to the basket, etc. Vic, untapped potential. We know from his IU days, he kind of wore out the check-in card to go to the practice facility there, and he's a guy that works extremely hard, and I think you got him here, motivated, and gave him a fresh environment where he was the man, and he really maximized it. So my guess is you'd hope for maybe a first-round pick and a rotation player, or 2 guys that, in their second year that are undervalued in the Pacers' evaluations.
Yeah, ideally you'd want to turn Paul George into Vic and Domas, and then Vic into another Vic and Domas.
100%. You're exactly right, Adam.
Final question from us. I was reading your latest piece, and I think that's something you're going to be doing on a weekly basis. Pacers last week, and you mentioned that Domas has plantar fasciitis, and we've got a real injury concern with who we were just talking about there. Do you see that being a long-term injury for him? Do you see him missing any of these games after the scrimmage games? What do you see as, or what does the team see as the time that it's going to take for him to get back on the court and back and firing again?
Yeah, I appreciate you reading that. And the one concern right now is the Pacers have 4 or 5 of these little, what seem to be kind of knick-knack injuries that nothing you're too concerned with, but anything that keeps guys off the practice court for more than a day is a little bit concerning. And as we record this here in Indiana, it's Monday, and Miles Turner didn't practice. So that's new and noteworthy. On top of that, nothing, again, I don't think to be concerned with. Nate McMillan keeps talking about these soft tissue injuries and things. If anyone's had or knows somebody with plantar fasciitis, it's nothing you want. Extremely painful. And it was interesting. Nate today said he's not putting any weight on it. Well, that's not true, because I saw Naz, I think it was, post an Instagram video of Domas walking just fine to the team bus yesterday. So maybe he means on the court and in practice, where he has not practiced now 3 days in a row. Jakar Sampson remains out. Goga continues to have this knee soreness that he's had all season long. And while we record this as well, I should note it's his 21st birthday. Having to celebrate
birthday, Goga.
inside the bubble. Can't say it's not memorable, I guess. And Kevin Pritchard has had his birthday yesterday, or last week, I should clarify. But in terms of Domas, nothing to be super concerned with. I would not expect him in the first couple scrimmages, it sounds like. And it doesn't surprise me if he kind of lays low here for a week, and then they reevaluate him basically in a week leading up to the games there the last week in July. So certainly concerning. Any injury to me is a little bit concerning. We could even mention Malcolm, still not 100% conditioning-wise after contracting COVID-19. But otherwise, Pacers relatively healthy. And my guess is this might be something, as far as Domas, that he would play through if it was needed. And obviously these scrimmages where everybody's going to get a chance, not needed at all.
Yeah. And just to finish up, Scott, I think we just want to get a final view from you. How far do you see this team going if Victor plays, and then if Victor doesn't play?
Yeah, and that's a good question in its own right. And for one, I should say Nate today said that the plan is for Victor to play in the scrimmages, which I noted in my tweet. We know things change, and Nate's not necessarily always clued in all this. So we don't know.
He might decide to play. He might decide to not play.
Exactly. Until Victor tells us what he's going to do, I don't take it at its word anymore, because we've already got burned on him several times in all of this. I think if Victor plays, I think the Pacers are probably advancing to the second round. I like, and this is obviously pending health, both with the Pacers and with other teams, but I think they got enough playmaking. They got that dogged mentality. They got guys that haven't been there that are eager to make it, right? The Pacers have not advanced past the first round since 2014. That's when Paul George was at his best. Since before the injury, it has been that long. Without Vic, I just can't see him advancing past that first round. Although, and if Vic does rule himself out, there is a legitimate argument to stressing that maybe the Pacers in the short term with very little practice time aren't better without Victor, solely because that's what they've been with all season, right? And we saw that 6-game slide after his first game back. So there is a legitimate thought to maybe playing more team basketball around each other, less stagnant, that they could be better off. However, that said, we all know you need playmakers, you need scorers, you need guys that have been there in the playoffs, and Victor has that above almost anyone on this Pacers roster.
And fingers crossed we get Miami in the first round, because I know that there's a growing contingent of Pacers fans that really want Miami and really want to beat the Heat. So it has a lot of similarities to 2014 in that I think there's a little bit more than just a first-round series at stake if we do play Miami. I think there'll be a lot of Pacers
Jimmy
fans
Butler
that want to show
and TJ Warren.
Oh, yes. Yeah. That heavyweight battle has got 2 more rounds before the playoffs. So who would you pick in a dark alley, Jimmy Butler or TJ Warren?
Neither. I don't want to get in the way of any of them. I don't think you can win. Nope.
No.
And of those two, I don't even know who would come out on top.
Well, I think
might see it.
There's a lot of disrespect around for TJ Warren, and I feel like he's seeing out all that. So I hope that we see something special out of him when he plays the Heat.
Absolutely. I think it'd be a lot of fun. And people don't give him enough credit. He is the leading scorer on this Pacers team. His first year with this group, and on top of that, he's made an excellent job of adapting and learning to play defense, something he's never been asked to do in the NBA.
Scott, leading in steals and deflections, I was just going to add.
Yeah, very true. Very true. Scott, we're got to wrap it up there, but thank you so much for your time. You can check out fieldhousefiles.com. You can subscribe to Fieldhouse Files everywhere you get your podcasts. Scott, Agness, thanks for being on the Paceroos podcast.
Thank you, guys. Thanks for having me on the Paceroos. I appreciate it.
And that was Scott Agness on the Paceroos podcast. Once again, we thank Scott for his time. A really fascinating interview with some really interesting information about Victor Oladipo's situation, his relationship with the team, and I guess the way that his messaging has got out there. I think the biggest thing for me was the way that his teammates found out about all of the milestones he's hit over the last 6 months or so, including when he was supposed to come back, his minutes restriction, when he was going to play, whether he was going to play in Orlando and as it were, not originally going to play in Orlando. Justin, do you think that it's a good thing that his teammates found out through the media?
No, I don't, and I'm quite perplexed that you decide as a player. Oladipo sometimes said, "Oh, you don't know what it's like to be in my shoes with rehab and everything he goes through." Well, in my circumstance, in my shoes, if I was him, I just wouldn't be going through the media to tell the greater community and your own teammates, your organization about your movements. Even if I was someone like Miles Turner or Sabonis, and you wake up in the morning and you're set to see Oladipo, or you just saw him yesterday, and you get news from Shams, you'd be like, "Oh, why didn't he just tell me yesterday?" Yeah. So I'm very surprised.
Alex, are you worried about the trust between Oladipo and the organization moving forward based off that sort of anecdote that the line of communication hasn't really been there?
Yeah, definitely, man. I think, we've talked about it, and Justin, I want to add to yours. You talked about the players' reaction. If you're Miles Turner, I'm livid, man, because he's sacrificed his minutes this year. He's sacrificed his touches, his usage rate for the benefit of guys like Victor Oladipo coming back and taking shots. And then for him to turn around and not even tell you that he's going to pretty much not play. I think for me, we've talked about it, but it's the disconnect between Oladipo and not just the front office, but his teammates. That's where my biggest concern comes in. And, we're going to sound like a broken record, obviously, but he keeps going to Shams, which I have no problem with, but tell your team first, then go to Shams and let him break the news, I think is where the biggest thing is coming in.
Yeah, I think it was really interesting. I was watching the documentary on the decision 10 years on, and a key part of that was LeBron was asked by Jim Gray, does the team that you're going to know that you're going there? And before he announced it, he said they do now. So he actually informed Miami before he made the live announcement on ESPN. Yeah. So
and he let Dan Gilbert know as well.
He did, and Brian Windhorst told the story that he actually had that piece of intel from Dan Gilbert before the decision was broadcast. And he tweeted, I think, he had a choice to I guess, tweet confirmation or tweet sort of sources say, and I think he went with my sources are telling me rather than sort of going with the definitive LeBron James will sign with the Miami Heat. But it just shows that, LeBron obviously handled that particular situation, which in hindsight was a poorly handled situation overall on balance. He handled it by telling the teams what was going on before he told the media what was going on. So if in potentially one of the bigger PR disasters of the NBA over the last 10 years, the player can tell the team before the media, then I just don't understand why the player, in this case, Victor Oladipo, can't tell the team before he tells the media. And to me, it says one of two things. Either he doesn't, and this is a big call to make, but it only tells me one of two things, and that is he either doesn't trust that the team can retain that information and stop it from leaking out, or he doesn't care. And
it's got to be the latter, doesn't it? Yeah. The Pacers have never leaked a bit of information.
Yeah, exactly. It's definitely number two there, Adam. And it's concerning that the more people us three have spoken to, I think we're getting the same answer where Scott Agness has just said, we put the question to him, what's his, guide on Oladipo, and all signs are pointing to Miami. He even mentioned the New York Knicks.
Yeah. And, I was talking to someone about this today, and, we've spoken before about Oladipo being pretty easily influenced by those around him. And, I did put the question to Scott about his teammates potentially having a say in whether or influence over whether he plays. For me, that's the clear distinction here. In Indiana or in Miami, he's been surrounded by his own people, his own team, who have been reinforcing, take it slow, et cetera, et cetera. In Orlando, he's surrounded by the team, by the staff. He's scrimmaging with his teammates. He's enjoying playing basketball, which all of these guys do. Alex, do you think, the love of the game is causing Victor to potentially want to play in Orlando, along with those 3 million reasons that we learned about via Twitter?
Well, I was just going to say, I know we joked about this, but if you guys, for all those that follow me on Twitter, you would have seen I posted that video, and then I joked that he must have watched my the mixtape I made for him.
Clearly did.
How much he loved it. So I'm gonna stick with that answer. But no, I think that's right, man. I think we talked about that. Guys like Paul George, Jimmy Butler, I think they for sure have an influence on Victor, and from all reports, that's something that's a concern for the Pacers. So being around no one else but Indiana guys every single day, you're living with them pretty much like it's college again. So I think being around them for sure, I think that's helped a lot.
I'm going to say it was fan backlash. And definitely, I actually thought that as of yesterday, but speaking to Scott on the episode, and he mentioned, Oladipo's checking his phone, checking his Twitter.
He sees everything. Yeah.
He sees everything. And I knew that without even listening to it, because I could see that in Vic's persona in that media press conference. I've never seen him so down and defensive. That's not, Vic's bubbly and he's positive and he's always, talking high in spirits. I've never seen him that down. And I knew he'd been reading his comments. I mean, we knew that from him liking that guy's tweet saying basically shouldn't max him out. So I personally think Oladipo's gone, oh no, look at all the fan backlash I'm getting. I actually think there might be rumblings within his team and management going, why did I pull out? Look at what this has cost me.
Yeah. Alex, he clearly reads everything, doesn't he?
100%. He wasn't even tagged in that tweet. Like he had to have looked up his name on Twitter or someone he follows.
He did the Andrew Bogut.
Shout out to our boy Homicide and Bogut, still going back and forth strong. But, yeah, that was funny to me. You know, probably the only media attention Pacers will get all year long is Victor Oladipo liking a tweet, someone talking trash to him.
Yeah, it's really crazy to consider where we've come in 12 months. I mean, 12 months ago, he was rehabbing from injury. We were all, you know, missing him greatly and excited to see him back on the court with a fresh crop of new teammates that we literally just signed 12 months ago. And now it's just looking increasingly like his days as a Pacer are numbered. And that's really sad because, you know, I'm currently wearing a Victor Oladipo jersey under the hoodie that I'm wearing right now. Like, don't get it twisted. We love this guy. We want him to stay in Indiana forever, but we're also realists, and we also have, you know, reading the tea leaves of what we've been told and what we've spoken about, and it doesn't look good. I mean, it doesn't look like this is going to be a happy marriage forever. And Justin, it seems like it's all sort of coming to a head before free agency hits, because I can't see Kevin Pritchard letting him walk for nothing.
Look, I think we mentioned this a couple of weeks ago on an episode, and you guys are well aware in all sport, really, with a star player, the longer it goes, the worse it gets. Like, if he's going to sign a contract extension with the Pacers as a max, and if we put that offer to him, he's gone if he refuses it, 100%, because there's nothing more the Pacers franchise can do. I'd love to know what Kevin Pritchard and Chad Buchanan are thinking right now. What they'd have a plan A, plan B, and plan C option, I think.
Yeah.
And I think they will offer Vic a contract. They definitely won't trade him without giving him the offer, hey, we want to keep you. But it's just getting less and less likely. But there's a lot of tangibles that can happen with this, because Vic's going to look pretty stupid if we beat Miami in the playoffs and then goes to Miami and says, oh, I'm all about winning, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's what makes this bubble so important. And if it's a Pacers Heat playoff series, we mentioned to Scott how many, sub stories there are. But if the Pacers manage to beat the Heat, I think there's a little bit of Oladipo that goes, oh, that makes that decision a bit harder to leave.
Thanks. Yeah.
It 100% does. I think in any Pacers Heat series, there was so much more at stake than just the playoff series. And obviously we've spoken about TJ Warren, Jimmy Butler, but also we have the opportunity to I guess, consolidate that and say to Vic, this is a winning franchise, this is a winning team. If you go to the other side, then we're not actually as good as they are. So I think it carries weight, but to be honest, I kind of wish a player would just come out and say what they feel, which is, I just want to pick where I want to live and who I want to play with, because that's what we see time and time and time again with these guys. Kawhi recruited Paul George, who wasn't even a free agent, to join the Clippers, and the Clippers got it done. Anthony Davis, who wasn't even a free agent, got to go to LA because he wanted to play with LeBron. If Vic wants to play with these guys, he's going to go there. If Giannis wants to play with Jimmy Butler, he's going to go there. But I just kind of wish he, you at this point you've got to either refuse the contract extension and then force a trade, or be straight somehow behind closed doors with the team to say, guys, I'm out. You got to trade me.
Well, yeah, and you're right, Adam. I was going to flip it. I'll put a question to both of you guys. I was thinking about it the other night where, all right, we're all Pacers, one-eyed supporters. We want the best for the team. But, all right, let's fully take ourselves out of the equation. Alex, if you were Oladipo, what would you do? Would you stay with Pacers or would you go to a Miami?
Oh, man. It's tough for me to gauge whether it's a money thing or location thing. But if I'm Vic and this is my last chance, first and only chance to get a max contract, I'm going whoever's signing me the max.
So let's say if Miami and Pacers offer max.
Yeah, I'm going Miami.
I love this.
I'm going Miami.
Yeah, Adam, what about you?
Yeah, I'm the same. I'm going away from the small market team, and I'm going to the big market team where there's an all-star, where there's a established multi-time all-star waiting for me. And
there you go.
That's the truth.
Yeah, we all complain and we're all going to go, oh, pitchforks with fire if Oladipo leaves. But I thought the same thing, right? I thought, man, I'd go to Miami, sunny, less taxes. You play with a star, Butler and maybe Giannis or something like that, and probably got a higher chance to win under Pat Riley, who's built a championship team. So take yourself out of the equation. I don't think you can go too hard on Oladipo, although as a fan, very disappointing.
You can't go too hard on him, but you can go hard. You can go hard on the way he's handled it. For me, like
for sure.
you can critique the way that he's handled it, and you can say you're well within your rights then to say, look, if under the same circumstances you'd move teams too, you'd also have to expect that team's going to trade you to try and get a return. So. If you're happy to move, then you've got to be happy to be moved ahead of that. If Miami's going to be your ultimate destination, regardless of where you go and what you do.
That's one thing probably us three are more confident about. I don't think the Pacers will lose him for nothing.
Yeah.
Historically, I can't remember losing a player. Like we've traded Jermaine O'Neal, the Paul George. Like anytime a star wants to move on, we've made sure we've got some sort of return for him.
Yeah.
So I think, they'd have the tough conversation and then pull the trigger on a trade.
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting few weeks. We're going to come to you with another episode, I think, before the NBA kicks off again around these scrimmage games. Justin, if you can find a stream of those scrimmage games, please let us know. But in Australia, we are in lockdown. So the three of us are in Melbourne, Victoria. So we're in lockdown. So there's plenty of opportunity for us to bring you the Paceroos over the next month. Stay safe out there. And this has been the Paceroos Podcast.